I'm Conrad, I'm the chairman of Debrett's, which is best known for the peerage and baronetage and also for etiquette. And this year we've got the book on the royal wedding, and much of it has been written by Rowan Pelling. Rowan, you're best known as the editor of Erotic Review and a very erudite commentator for the Telegraph and the Mail. And I just wondered how you adapted your style for writing our royal wedding book.
Well, I was obviously very careful not to put in any language that would be offensive. But in fact, I don't think I had to alter my style a huge amount, because the Erotic Review was essentially going to the same audience. It was a very British audience, and it was a very British erotic magazine. And so these were people who lived in the home counties, or a lot of them in the countryside. They tended to be royalist, in fact, and churchgoers, and people who lived outwardly pretty conventional lives. And I think that's one of the interesting, wonderful things about British society, is that people can't be compartmentalized in a very easy way. So you can easily be someone who enjoys a bit of erotic frisson, and you love the royal family, and you go to church on Sunday. And I think that that style, which I think is managed to be both irreverent and reverent at the same time, that I think we like to be fond of our institutions and at the same time to be able to talk about them, you know, without stiff, po-faced language that's, you know, that I think we've now rather outgrown. We love this family.
Mm. No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think what's intriguing is that since the wedding, there have been a huge number of books that have come out about the royal wedding, a lot of them very pictorial, some with more words than others. So how did you go about distinguishing the Debrett's book from the others in the marketplace?
Leaves the others miles behind. Actually, I am a collector of royal memorabilia. I grew up near Sevenoaks in Kent, so very much in sort of royal loving heartland. And I was a little bit anxious that there were so many other royal wedding books coming out. Now I looked at them, I thought, they are so thin. My goodness, they're thin. They've just picked up a bit of the tittle-tattle that's been in newspapers. They've rushed out some photos, and this is what they felt, rushed. They felt, we're going to whiz them out after the wedding, there's going to be no context, there's going to be no historical background, none of the detail that really makes this book so different. And also, on the wedding day itself, I put on trainers and I ran between 6 different venues. I was outside Westminster Abbey, I was along Whitehall, I went down to the Mall, I was outside the balcony, I was in St James's Park. I ran everywhere to see what was going on, to feel the whole sense of the day. And I really got a sense of the millions of people who were out there and about. And then afterwards I watched the videos of the wedding for a couple of days. I read every single royal book I could get my hands on. So I like to think that this book is really steeped in that sort of sense of deep research and knowledge and affection for the couple. But this is a proper book that you can get into, that will tell you everything, not just about William and Catherine, but about the royal family itself and the tradition of marriage within it.
It was fascinating. When we asked you to write the royal book, what we didn't know was that you've actually, I think, been to every royal wedding since Princess Anne. Is that right? You've actually stood on the Mall and seen every single one. Tell me, we didn't know that, but what made this wedding so special for you?
Yes, it's actually true. I come from this family where the minute there was the slightest excuse to get out there with your Union Jack, there you were standing on the Mall and waving it. And my mother and my grandmother were great royalists. This wedding was particularly wonderful, though, because, of course, what it celebrated was a recognisable love affair. And I think that in previous marriages, yes, you know, there have been something rather romantic at the heart of them sometimes, but there was also a lot of constitutional interference. You know, people had to, in the royal family, had to marry someone who was perceived to be of aristocratic lineage, even if they were still called a commoner, as Lady Diana Spencer was. This time, this was a couple who fell in love at university, and that made it very different. And the whole way they tailored a state occasion to make it personal made it so moving. And you felt that in the crowd on the day. You really felt that people felt they are this pair. They're sort of part of us. They're like us.
One of the other things that fascinates me is this outpouring of emotion that occurred on the day and the days leading up to it. I mean, France every year has its Bastille Day. America each year has its Thanksgiving. In our country, it seems to me that every 30 years or so, we have a monarch or a future monarch that's about to marry. And 30 years ago, we had Charles and Diana. One of the things that fascinates me, you've been to both. What do you see as the differences between the two weddings?
I think big difference this time was that the people were out of practice, and you feel that the crowds really hadn't turned out before. So it was a bit like when people marched against the wall. There were a lot of people there who hadn't ever been on a march before. There were a lot of people this time around who had never stood on the street for a royal occasion, never waved a flag, never thought of standing somewhere to get a glimpse of their monarch or of their future monarch in William's case. This was really funny. You know, people were, oh gosh, do we sing Land of Hope and Glory now? When should I wave my flag? Oh no, it's the Duke of York. Put it down. We're waiting for. You know, I really felt that it was very interesting to see people who were out of practice, who maybe become disillusioned with the royal family, which is something which had happened in the last couple of decades, reforming and sort of going, actually, I hadn't really considered how important this institution is to me. So that was a huge difference. Also, it was, in a funny sort of way, it was like a festival. It was like a rollicking student event. There were many more young people there than anyone talked about. I had a great time with sort of girls dressed up in tiaras, with, you know, fake engagement rings on. I saw a man dressed, well, there were lots of men dressed as brides, actually, lots of students dressed up in wedding dresses. You know, there was this wonderful carnival atmosphere, and I think people have loosened up a bit about how they can participate. You know, before it was all a little bit, well, we were all lined up and our shoes were polished, and we went and we stood there and we waved our flags reverently. This was more like people were joining in with the actual celebration. They felt like part of it. They didn't feel they had to drop a curtsy. Thought, you know, this is part of who I am. This is a very modern celebration.
Well, you made an interesting point a couple of minutes ago about the fact that we haven't got a presidency. There's no doubt the royal family has gone through its ups and downs over the last 20 years or so, and this is an up without any question. What do you think it really means to the UK to have had this sort of marriage? What do you think the long-term effect will be?
Really interesting that it seems there's going to be a huge long-term effect. I think economists have talked about Catherine having this £2 billion effect on the economy, that is what she is perceived to be worth in terms of tourists coming in, people being enthusiastic about Britain, and it really took people, I think, out of that place. We were in a very dark winter, weren't we? Following on from the expenses scandal with the MPs and obviously the recession, people felt gloomy, and suddenly there was this glimpse of light. There was something that was really both enjoyable and romantic that everyone could relate to, and I think that feel-good factor, I mean, it sounds very naff to talk about that, but actually it's very important, and it's also important for our sort of bonding process with the royals. If our ongoing thing is that we sort of say, yes, you know, we are going to be a monarchy, we don't want to be a republic, then you have to feel affection for the people who are at the head of it.
One of the things we've tried to do is to balance the traditions of the royals, going back to Queen Victoria, the fact that she popularised the white wedding dress. And the traditions go all the way through, whether it's been bridesmaids, whether it's been page boys in the church service, whether it's St Paul's or Westminster Abbey. The one really modern element in this wedding was the reception itself. What do you think that says about the royal family today?
Yeah, it was very canny of the royal family to recognise that they needed to show in some way that this was a normal wedding as well as a state occasion. So, you know, we're going to have a buffet like other people do, and, you know, we're going to have a party afterwards. Yes, we're going to have the formal party where the heads of state can be entertained, and it's a really dignified affair, and the Queen presided over that. But then, you know, rather hilariously, I think the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh said, you know, we're going. We don't want to be there to see the throne room turned into this enormous disco and cocktails being served and, you know, lounge sofas put around. But that was William and Kate's part of the day, and they were allowed to have that, which I think was wonderfully affectionate of the royal family to give that to them and say, you know, this is all right, that their style is a bit different. Actually, there were other parts of the wedding that were different too, notably the way they arrived at the Abbey. Before, it's always been the horse-drawn carriage. This time there were cars, and there were also minibuses taking various dignitaries. And this was a very symbolic way of saying we are not wasting money wherever we can. We've said, look, we're not going to just splash it out all over. We're going to have a grand ceremonial send-off at the end but we're actually going to rein things in. We realised there was a recession going on, and that was very sensitive, I think, to the mood of the nation.
And one of the other things which was absolutely beautiful, which I think threw people a little bit, was that they wrote their own prayer. And that was just a lovely thing to do, wasn't it? I mean, that meant a lot to them.
Yes, I think I can see the very subtle and canny hand of Richard Charters in that, the Bishop of London, because he's very good at that sort of. I think it's it's a little bit modern to call it PR, but knowing how to touch the hearts of other people and say, well, we're opening up this thing, and we're making everyone see that this is a real human couple at the middle of this. This is not just a great big TV event, and the fact that they wrote their own prayer, you just put something personal in the middle of a very formal service, because it's necessary, because it's a state event, to have all this grand music and wonderful choirs and a real sense of awe. But then there was this just touching personal prayer which had words which were not exactly colloquial, but they sounded like two people speaking.
Absolutely. When we put the book together, we talked about who should write the foreword, and we asked Julian Fellows to write it. He's written the most inspiring few words about it. I mean, what impact do you think it has on the book itself?
Oh, I think the introduction is wonderful. It just sets exactly the right tone. And I think nobody feels more than Julian Fellows does this huge affection for the traditions of the country and for the royal family, and what it means in a deep sense. I think it's quite easy to sort of maybe look at some of the wonderful dramas he's written and sort of see them as, a sort of fantasy world. But actually Julian's very aware of how our institutions really feed into the deepest part of the British soul, and it's really a very moving and amusing introduction. And he makes the point that this is a wonderful thing, that actually traditionalists really embrace the fact that we have this new queen who comes from different stock to previous brides. She's from Durham miners' stock, and that's a wonderful thing, because all families, particularly long aristocratic lineages, need revitalising, need a breath of fresh air, and it's wonderful to have Julian embracing that, I think.
What is life going to be like for Catherine as a royal? Because she's going to be, for the rest of her life, living her life in a goldfish bowl. What does it really mean to her as an individual? I think a lot of people are interested in that.
I do think that her family, Catherine's family, must feel huge trepidation about waving her goodbye and sending her to this marriage, which will make her a public figure, and public figure in the way we saw was terribly destructive to Princess Diana, that she was hounded by the press and became the most visible woman in the world, and that remains so even in death. And Catherine is rapidly becoming a similar sort of global celebrity. Everything she wears is monitored. If she puts on a dress from a high street shop, it sells out in seconds. It's a very, very alarming place to be in, and it's wonderful that she has such a supportive, sort of normal, in inverted brackets, family, and clearly a very supportive husband, because it's impossibly difficult, first of all, to be in the public eye, and secondly, to join the royal family, which has this huge tradition of all sorts of little rules and regulations and how you should behave. You have to meet sort of all these foreign dignitaries. You have to know about politics, the arts. I mean, would any one of us want to do that? I salute her for embracing it, because she takes it on with the man she loves, but it is not enviable. I don't know anyone in the world who would want to step into her shoes.
That's the critical issue. I think the thing that's come across to everybody and why they've embraced it is because they love each other.
Yeah.
And that is the critical issue, isn't it? Finally then, so where do you think this book sits in the pantheon of royal books generally? What were your views now, having been involved with it for the last 6 to 9 months?
Well, of course, I'm very, very proud of the book, and it has wonderful bits of writing on lineage and all the sort of things that Debrett's are very strong at from other members of the Debrett's family, if I can call it that, but people who work alongside you. And it has Julian's wonderful introduction, fabulous photography. It is without doubt the best book out there celebrating the marriage. It's wonderfully authoritative, it's gorgeous to look at, and I think it's the sort of heirloom book that people will pass down generations. This is not going to be sort of passed on to Oxfam or something. This is going to be a family treasure, and I think will make the most wonderful Christmas present for anyone of any age who has an interest in the royal family. And whatever people say, well over 70% of the population watched the wedding on television. That is how huge the interest is, and if people want a wonderful memoir, I truly believe this is the book they should buy.
And I have to say, Rowan, you downplay your own writing, because I think it's absolutely stupendous. It gives immense reflection on the day, I think it'll be seen as sympathetic in the years to come, and I think you add joyously to the book, and we're very, very grateful. Rowan, thank you very much indeed.